Hi, welcome to Coach Ross World History. Today we're going to be talking about monotheism. Monotheism is the belief in one singular God instead of multiple gods. And today we're really going to be focusing on the story of Abraham. This is one of the oldest stories in the world, and all three major monotheistic religions trace their lineage through Abraham. In fact, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are often called Abrahamic religions. You've probably heard about the violence and fighting going on in the Gaza Strip lately between Hamas and Israel. This conflict, despite going on in present day, has its roots thousands of years ago during the time of Abraham. So in order to understand the problems going on now, you have to understand this story that set Christians and Jews on a divergent path with Arab Muslims. Now, this story starts with Abraham. Jews, Christians, and Muslims believe that Abraham was the first person to receive the Word of God. And they believe that God promised Abraham and his wife Sarah a family, and he also told Abraham that he was promised the land of Canaan, which is known as the Promised Land. Abraham was from the Mesopotamian village of Ur, and the Promised Land, as you can see, is in modern-day Israel. Now, Abraham and Sarah were promised a child, and they waited and waited, and they were unable to have a child. Sarah had passed her childbearing years, and they were both worried that they would not have a son to pass on Abraham's birthright. So, concerned that Abraham would not have an heir, Sarah convinced Abraham to have a child with her handmaiden, whose name was Hagar. So, Abraham and Hagar had a baby boy together and named him Ishmael. And for 14 years, Ishmael was Abraham's only child. Until, miraculously, Abraham and Sarah were able to conceive their first child, even though Sarah was believed much too old to have children. Their first child was a boy whom they named Isaac. So, now you can see that Abraham has two sons. The oldest is Ishmael, whom he had with Hagar, and the younger son is Isaac, whom he had with his wife. Now, the question becomes, which son is going to receive Abraham's birthright, which is the Promised Land? Now, as the story goes, one day Ishmael was picking on or making fun of Isaac, and Sarah became very upset. She convinced Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away because she wanted her son Isaac to receive his birthright. After receiving word from God that Hagar and Ishmael would be safe, the next day Abraham forced Hagar and Ishmael into the desert, giving them bread and water. So this solidifies that Isaac will receive the birthright of Abraham and be the heir to the Promised Land from God. Now, looking at Abraham's full family tree, you can see that Isaac would go on to have two children, Esau and Jacob, and through the bloodline of Jacob is where Christians and Jews trace their lineage. Supposedly, Moses and Jesus were both direct descendants of Jacob. On the other side of the family tree is Ishmael, and Arabs and Muslims trace their lineage through Ishmael, and supposedly the Islamic prophet Muhammad was a direct descendant of Ishmael. So, both sides of this story, Jews and Muslims, both believe that they are the rightful owners of this land. Jews believe that since Isaac received the birthright, the land is rightfully theirs. Muslims believe that since Ishmael is the oldest son, that he is the true heir to the land. Now, many of you have probably heard of the story of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. The story goes that God told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, and just before Abraham was going to sacrifice his son for God, an angel came down to stop Abraham. This story happened after Hagar and Ishmael were sent away. Now, looking at a map of modern-day Israel, the Gaza Strip and West Bank are currently controlled by the Palestinian Arabs, whereas the orange section is Israel, which is controlled by the Jews. So, next time you hear about violence or fighting in the Middle East and Israel, and trust me, there will be a next time, you will understand how complicated and old the story really is. However, it is important to note that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are very separate and distinct religions, but they also have many similarities. And these similarities are often forgotten and ignored when discussing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. To fully understand these issues, you must keep in mind the story of Abraham and the long history that these religions share. Thanks for listening, and remember, don't be another brick in the wall.